Hello, hello.
Hello.
Good to see you, Chris.
Good to see you. How's your day going?
It is going. That's what I can say, but that's good sometimes.
Great, great. Well, Dr. Krista, I'd love to have you just tell everyone where you're from, a little background about yourself before we talk about stress.
For sure. So I'm Dr. Krista with Live Wellness, and I actually grew up in the mountains of California in a very small town. But I grew up in a community of kind of like-minded people. Some people may know of Waldorf schools. So I grew up going to a Waldorf school, and Waldorf schools are very focused on experiential learning and the environment and, learning about plants and gardening, all of these things. So I think that was kind of innately in me as I grew up. And then I actually went through my own health struggles. So I was diagnosed with something called PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, when I was a teenager. And I really struggled with my health. I struggled with gaining weight and acne and hair growth in places people do not want hair growth. But ultimately, it really affected my confidence and my self-esteem, which I think health, when it's not so great, does that for most people. And so it started to kind of isolate me. When I went to college, I wouldn't really socialize. I kind of holed up in my dorm room, and I didn't feel good, even though I was put on medications to supposedly balance my hormones. And I took those medications every day, but I actually started to have side effects. I was getting headaches. I couldn't sleep. I was gaining even more weight, which was the opposite of what I wanted. And so eventually I figured out that there had to be a different way. There had to be something else that I could do to better my health and not feel so discouraged and frustrated with not getting the answers I wanted, or doing everything that my doctors told me to do, but not feeling any better. And I know there's so many people out there who feel that way. And so that's why ultimately I went to naturopathic medical school, because I myself found a naturopath and I was able to get off all of my medications and my symptoms went away. One of the other things I was told was that I wouldn't be able to have children without interventions. And I actually have a 1-year-old now, and that was all done naturally, no interventions needed. So I realized I needed to go to naturopathic medical school so that I could learn all of this information to help all those people who feel the way I did, because I do not want anyone to ever feel discouraged or out of control of their own health, or like there's no answer for them, because we can all heal. We just have to put in the work. We have to help our bodies remove the obstacles. And like Dr. Adam talked about, a lot of that has to do with those pillars of health.
Absolutely. Do you want to touch on the 5 before we get into stress?
Yeah. So again, the 5 pillars: nutrition, detoxification, energy balance, which includes stress, but also sleep and exercise, hormones. Balancing your hormones is key. I feel like a lot of people miss that component when they try to get healthy. They work on nutrition, they work on working out, but they don't touch on hormones, which also includes things like stress, which we'll talk about. And then, of course, the last pillar is that mentorship piece, because you really need someone to help you apply the knowledge you're learning, right? They say knowledge is power, but to us, if you're not putting that into action, then it's not really worth anything, right?
Applied knowledge.
Yes, exactly. So I know that it is National Stress Awareness Month. So I really think that we should dive into that specific piece of the pillar, particularly because I know a lot of people are dealing with stress, and there's actually different kinds of stress. So I want to preface by saying that, because a lot of people will come into our clinic and they'll say, oh, yeah, I'm not really that stressed. I'm retired, things are good, or whatever it may be, right? But there are 3 different types of stress. So the first one is actually physical stress. So physical stress is when, for example, you get into a car accident or you have an injury, right? Those are physical stresses to the body. But so is carrying extra weight. Right? If you think about that, like, for example, my 1-year-old who I mentioned, He weighs 25 pounds at this point. For me to carry him every single day, all the time, is a big stress to my body. Like I start to feel it in my back and my feet hurt and all of these things. But a lot of us are carrying that extra weight every single day, and we're not really paying attention to that. We just know we might not feel as good as we used to. So that's physical stress. So that might be one thing going on. Inflammation is another physical stress if your gut is inflamed, for example. And a lot of that comes from the second type of stress, which is chemical stress. And I know that Dr. Adam mentioned a lot of different chemical stresses on the body. So, the air we're breathing, the food we're eating, the water we're drinking, potentially EMS or light pollution. Those things can be toxins, but so can medications, right? Those are innately chemicals that affect our bodies in many different ways, right? No drug has one effect only. It's doing a lot of different things. And our liver, for example, has to process that each and every day. So these are all chemical stresses. And then the third type of stress is, of course, mental emotional stress. So yes, we can't necessarily control who our family is, right? Or who our boss is. Those stresses come, but we have to have the right tools in place to be able to control how we respond to stress, because we want to make sure that it's not affecting our physiology, because when it does, that's when inflammation occurs. And I know Dr. Adam talked about, cortisol, that's our stress hormone. That will create more inflammation in the body, and it will also make you gain more weight around your middle, which creates another type of stress, that weight stress, right? So it's kind of a domino effect as it goes along. So those are the three types.
So give us some obviously the pillars, but give us some tips on what we can do to obviously reduce, the physical, the inflammation, the mental stress in our life.
Yeah. So starting with physical, since I mentioned that one first, tough to avoid things like accidents, right? Because they are accidents. But if you get injured, you really want to make sure you're doing all the things you can to decrease inflammation in the body, because that's the number one thing that prevents you from healing and recovering. If you do get injured, there is research now that shows being out in nature, or even having a plant in your home, or even having a picture of a plant or nature actually speeds up healing, which is really remarkable research, but it has to do with the phytochemicals that plants release. Our body actually needs some of those things to be able to heal. So that's one random thing you can do. But even things like being outside, getting sunshine, that vitamin D helps affect our immune system, and our immune system is responsible for healing our body, right? So that's an important piece. Other thing would be, of course, hydration. I know Dr. Adam talked about. Other things, hot and cold therapy, especially if you have some kind of muscle injury or strain, that can really speed up healing, because inflammation is heat and water combined. So sometimes you have to help mitigate that with hot and cold, things like cold laser therapy. So these are all, in the injury realm. For things like weight, the biggest thing is getting that inflammation down, which oftentimes stems from our gut, because our gut is where our immune system is housed. 80% of our immune system is in our gut. So if we want to work on our immune system to get inflammation down, we have to be paying attention to what's going on in our gut. And I feel like so many people just ignore the fact that they're bloating every day, or they have indigestion, or maybe they're not having a bowel movement every day and they just feel like that's normal for them. Those are all signs that something is off in the gut, and thus your immune system is going to be off, but also your hormones are going to be off, because your hormones are made in the gut as well. And hormones are in control of weight, essentially, right? They control inflammation, but there's also fat burning hormones and there are fat storing hormones. So that balance can be thrown off depending on what inflammatory response is going on in your gut. So that's a big thing to work on for physical stress. So then moving on to chemical stress, as Dr. Adam mentioned, detoxifying, right? Whether that be clearing things out in your lifestyle, food-wise, focusing on anti-inflammatory foods, which is going to be different for each person because we all have different physiology and we all have different exposures and different symptoms. So we can't all eat the same foods. Even some healthy foods can cause inflammation in some people. So it's really important to work with that mentor to help figure out which foods, particularly for you, help your body heal versus which ones cause inflammation. Right? So that's part of chemical stress. But again, medications, maybe there's some medications that you could be lower on, or maybe you could even get off of as you start to work on inflammation and stress and sleep and nutrition, all of these things that will help decrease that burden of chemical stress, as well as, working on the things you're putting on topically, the things you're eating, all of those that we've mentioned. So that's big for chemical stress. And then for emotional stress, yeah, number one thing I would say is really having a routine, something that helps to ground you, something that helps to calm down your nervous system. Because many of us every single day are in kind of fight or flight. We got to push through, we got to get work done, we got to pick up the kids, we got to take care of our parents, whatever it may be. And so we're just kind of pushing through, and that's in that sympathetic state where we're just like running, running, running. So we need to have at least a couple times a day where we breathe, right? We allow ourselves to check in with the normal rhythms of the body. And so for me, I like to have little cues to myself to remind myself to breathe. Like, for example, every time I walk through a doorway, that's a signal like, oh, make sure you remember to breathe. Or every time I get in or out of a car, make sure to breathe, right? So having these little cues can really help you get into that parasympathetic state. Meditation is, of course, a great thing to do. And there's different types of meditation. A lot of people feel like, I can't meditate. My mind goes crazy. It's going everywhere. Yes, that is why it's called a practice of meditation. It doesn't come easily to a lot of people, but there's different types of meditation to help you focus in. So if you're someone who your mind is everywhere all the time, you might need a physical object to focus on, like, for example, a candle flame, where that's really holding your attention. Or maybe you have some prayer beads and you count those as you're focusing on your breath, as you're sitting there, as you're feeling your body on the ground or in the chair or wherever it may be. Or maybe you need a moving meditation, something like Qigong or Tai Chi. These are meditative practices, but they involve movement. So you're actually focusing on your body a little bit more than just sitting there. So I often tell people, if you've tried one type of meditation and it didn't work for you, there are endless types that you can really find something that works for you. So adding that into your routine, adding something like gratitude journaling or a practice of saying gratitude. Research has actually shown that when you conjure up gratitude, the parts of your brain actually change from, if you were feeling anxious, if you were feeling stressed, that will go away as soon as you conjure up that feeling of gratitude. So it could be simple things like, I am so grateful that I woke up this morning, right? That I was able to step out of bed without pain, that my little child was there next to me, right? Just every little thing that you can conjure up is going to help your neurotransmitters fire in a different way to help prevent and mitigate stress, anxiety, things like that. Of course, therapy is amazing for working through stress and anxiety, depression. Um, Again, combating inflammation. When you have inflammation in your gut, it creates inflammation in your brain. And that's going to affect your neurotransmitter balance because, again, neurotransmitters are also made in the gut. So the more you work on that inflammation and that gut health, the stronger everything in your body is going to be, including resilience. So that was a lot of things.
No, that's great. Routine. Love that. Have a routine. And you mentioned so many great things. Breathing, meditation, gratitude journaling, therapy. All those things are great. Any last words on stress? And then I'd love to for you to share where people can find you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, what people need to be aware of is that you can't just ignore stress. right? A lot of us just think we can push through, we can hold it in, we can just not deal with it because we have to live our lives, we have to keep going. But ultimately, that affects our whole physiology, our whole body systems. You know, stress makes your immune system less responsive. If there's inflammation going on, you can't respond to viruses, bacteria, things as well. So you may end up sick more often. It affects our cardiovascular system, right? So we don't want to make ourselves prone to more cardiovascular risk. It affects our hormones, right? Having that cortisol up, that imbalance makes us gain weight. It affects so many different things. Again, even if it's not mental emotional stress, even if it's a different type of stress, you still have to be paying attention to that because ultimately we have to be proactive. We have to prevent as much as possible because unfortunately in this country especially, our health outcomes are just becoming worse and worse and worse.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is because we only react once something occurs. We're not working on preventing it. So that's where things like that routine or working with a therapist, getting outside more often, exercising. Oh, that's a big thing I should say too, is there are good stresses and there are bad stresses. So I just want to say that too, because not all stress is bad. It's actually important to have some stress in your life, which we call eustress. Eustress is when you're doing something maybe a little uncomfortable for your body or even your psyche, and it helps you grow, right? If you think of someone who is very afraid of heights, but every day they climb one more stair, they get a little bit further, they start to teach themselves that they're safe, that they can make it, that they can overcome. And that's growth, that's personal development. The same is true with exercise, right? That's technically a stress on your body, but that stress on your muscles, on your cardiovascular system is actually helping it grow, helping it develop more. If you get a cold, that is a stress on your immune system. But again, that is helping it grow. If you never get colds, like not even one a year, that's actually a bad sign for your immune system. It needs to be learning as it goes along. So good stress and bad stress, important to have some uncomfortability in your life to help you grow, develop, become a better person. Okay. Good stuff. I like it.
Great stuff. So where can we find you?
You can find us a lot of different avenues. Our website is livewellness.health, so not .com, but .health. And on Instagram and Facebook, our handles are live.wellness.health. So those are great places to reach out. And, we're always happy to chat with people, have free 15-minute conversations. What we do a lot of is create lifestyle programs for people because, again, all of these things have to be addressed. All of those pillars, if you want to see change in your body, if you want to feel better, if you want to be optimized, you can't just focus on one thing, right? You can't just focus on nutrition. You can't just focus on detoxing. You have to be doing all the things together. So sometimes you need help in establishing that correct system for you, because again, that's going to be different for every person depending on your life and your lifestyle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today.
No problem, Chris. It's been lovely. And I know that you're out there working on all of these things as well and supporting many, many people feel better, get inflammation down, eat in the right way, work out. So I'm so glad that we're on this mission together because the more lives change, the better, right? We want to end this needless suffering and this endless stress that people are going through. So thank you so much for your work as well and bringing awareness to National Stress Month also.
Thank you.